Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this special session of D Talks or Disruptive Literacy Talks. I am your host, Mashood Bhatt. As we continue this journey of exploring different disruptive solutions and ideas that can help us build greater momentum towards the goal of achieving universal foundational literacy and numeracy for all our children, it's very important to also not just look at how the policy is written on paper. Of course, its understanding is crucial, but it is equally important that how that policy is translated on the ground. And to fill this very important aspect, and often great policies, if they fail to translate on the ground, then it really impedes the different objectives that the policy has set out in the first place. So to address this question of how the foundational literacy and numeracy policy, which is in this new mission of Nipun Bharat as well, how can we ensure that it does actually translate effectively on ground on a large scale as that offered by India? We have a very special guest to speak on this. He is a change maker. He is the founder and CEO of Leadership for Equity. He has also been an Ashoka Fellow and on the advisory board of the Teach for India as well. So it's an absolute honor for us to welcome Mr. Madhukar Banuri to speak on today's topic, which is translating policy into action for foundational literacy and numeracy. Madhukar, thank you so much for giving us your valuable time here at Detox.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mashood, for having me.
Right. So for all those of us who are joining us on social media, we'd like to share that Madhukar has a presentation for us. So we'll start with the presentation, followed by a question and answer round. And we would encourage everyone to please share their questions, ideas, and comments on chat as well, so that we can take some of them as well for Madhukar's consideration. So Madhukar, the stage is yours.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mashood, once again. I think what I'd like to do is, obviously, as you shared, there's a small presentation. But I say that I know I've seen some speakers coming on Detox before, so I think it's so good to be here and also share my thoughts on foundational literacy and numeracy and the mission, and how do we sort of make it reality for the children of our country. So I do have a brief presentation. I think for the first 7 to 10 minutes, I just want to cover briefly about organizational leadership for equity and what we do. But more specifically, I think just also focus on what are some of the aspects that we feel, having spent almost 12 years in education and then majorly for the last 5 years is working closely with the state education departments. What are 3 or 4 things that I think we as a social sector community, ed sector community, or driving certain missions at this scale need to sort of focus on? So I'm just going to go into the presentation very sort of quickly. I just wanted to start off with a video because I think visual way is always easy to sort of get an understanding of what does LFE do. So I just have a 2-minute quick video on what is LFE.
There are 115 million children studying in government-run schools in India. Almost all of them come from the poorest of poor families and are unable to achieve even foundational levels of learning. What we see is only the tip of the iceberg. If we peek underneath the surface, the problem is more systemic. It comes from more than 800 local and state government bodies across India who face challenges with institutional and human resources to deliver quality education at scale. This is where we come in. At Leadership for Equity, we have a vision of building public education systems that refuse to let children down. In our twofold approach to change, we build the capacity of government system leaders and we influence system processes and policies. We train and provide proximate support to the system leaders at cluster, block, district, and state level to effectively implement programs to improve foundational learning and well-being of children. We also influence system processes and policies by advising senior government leadership and strengthening nodal academic bodies. Together, this results in effective government school systems delivering quality education at scale. Over the last 4 years, LFE has impacted close to 1,300 system leaders, aided the release of 12 state and district level policies through 3 academic bodies. Collectively, our work has reached 33,000 teachers and over 1.4 million students. In the next 5 years, we are determined to build over 5,000 system leaders to improve the learning and well-being of 15 million children across India. Educational equity in India can only be achieved by strengthening our public schools. Let's give them our best. There are 115 million children.
Right. So that's briefly about LFE and what we do, and I think I want to get into the aspect of this whole system leaders, because this is something that was a big part of our video. But I think our take on middle management, especially when it comes to the kind of work that we've been doing, and especially linked to the FLN mission that we're here to discuss. Unlike the developed countries, India, I mean, we all know this, we lack a highly skilled mid-level bureaucrats. Even if you see there's a huge amount of focus on the people that is in the last mile delivery in education cases, the teachers, and there's you have your IS officers. But as a country, we lack high cadre of highly skilled mid-level bureaucrats. For any sustenance of any impact or any scheme or the scale of impact, it is critical for us to invest in the mid-level bureaucrats. For our take is roughly there are 60,000 system leaders across country who are administratively and academically responsible to provide quality education to these children. If you're not able to sort of provide support to the mid-level management, what we call as system leaders, it's going to be hard for us to see any kind of mission or scheme that is run in education to be a success. So broadly speaking, what we do as an organization is we build system leaders and we influence system processes, and collectively our hypothesis is that it's going to lead to effective public school system, right? That's what we do in the short term, and I think of course in the long term that's where we want to approach. And then the idea of LFE's core model is to build capacity of system leaders in twofold, right? Like there's an element of training that we do, working on self-learning workshops and professional learning communities. But I think where we feel the magic happens, we all know to even do a focus intervention with teachers as an element of behavioral shift. We are talking about shifting some of these practices that have been happening for years and years together. So till the time we don't sit with the people that we are trying to train, we don't coach them, we don't co-create is what we call design, implement, and evaluate some of the work that's happening at a ground level, change is not going to happen. So the idea is that collectively the component of training we're doing is going to shift the capacity of officers and teacher mentors who are our system leaders, that is eventually going to lead effective or improvement in sort of student learning outcomes due to sustained classroom practices. This has been the journey of Leadership for Equity over the last many years. We were incubated in 2015 and 16, and now we have sort of expanded. We've predominantly been a Maharashtra-based organization, but now slowly sort of expanding our footprint into different parts of the country as well. Some quick key achievement, I think, in terms of stakeholder validation, as I was saying, there's a lot of investment of the government in our programs. We don't expect the government to pay LFE directly, but whatever programs we sort of co-creating with the government, there is an element of investment by the government, which truly shows that the government is truly treating us as an equal partner in terms of our program validation. Some of the data that we've been able to collect because of our intervention and the impact it has had on the skills of the different stakeholders across all cadres has been, good. We've had multi-level state, multi-year sort of MOUs and partnership with different organizations at different districts across Maharashtra. There's also global recognition in terms of the work and partnerships that we've been able to do over the last 4-5 years. And something that we're proud of in terms of COVID-19 response for education specifically, because there was conscious attempt made not to do any sort of relief work, but we ensured that there was a lot of support that was given to the state in order to roll out some of the support programs like offline worksheets, running a program called Abhyas Mala along with SCRT Maharashtra to reach out to more than 18 lakh students. And in partnership with Convigenius and SCRT Maharashtra, we sort of reached out to 8.5 million children as well. So a lot of effort over the last few years that we've been sort of working in education has been centered a lot around validation. Let me now get specific into FLN. And I think this is where a big part of our discussion that we're going to do over the next 30-40 minutes is going to revolve around. What is the current situation? I think this is something that we all know. The problem that COVID-19 pandemic has caused is really sort of redefine the idea of education. No, we did a research in Maharashtra from across 6 to 7 districts, and our team literally traveled and did surveys of parents and teachers to find out what was happening, right? So one, there is a visible problem. There's obviously a problem that we're trying to solve in terms of what is going on there. But I think one, again, this is from Maharashtra, but I'm pretty sure this can be applied to across India as well, is that like at least 2 students per teacher are out of reach. What it means, if you extrapolate some of the data, that a significant chunk, so at least 2 students and teachers in a state like Maharashtra, where we have about 7 lakh teachers, there is a chance that we might be losing almost 1.4 million. 14 lakh students might be out of reach. Now that's a scary thought. Now extrapolate that to India. What is happening is we took a lot of attempt over the last 2 or 3 decades to get children into school. Now I think there is a risk that we might run into losing our children back, into child labor or anything beyond, right? So I think we need to be cautious. So I think this is one area where the change of education, which has moved from quantity to quality, has now moved back into quantity to ensure children who are not out of school come back to school. So that's one big sort of a thing that we are seeing visible from the data, but also visible on the ground for those organizations. Many organizations are doing some amazing job on the ground. And this is coming as a trend from many organizations as well. The second piece of it, in terms of phone access, and this is not just for the student phone access, that has always been an issue that many students don't have, like, less than 20% of the children from underserved communities have access to sort of, internet facility or even mobile phone. That reduces to 8% if you go to more rural and tribal areas. Now, even teachers with phone access in rural and tribal areas, in some of the deep pockets, we found that roughly around 55-60% of the teachers are only able to have. A majority of the assumption that we are driving a lot of e-content and some of the digital online learning that we are able to promote. In fact, like our organization has also been promoting. We are also culprit in that sense. But in some of the deep rural and tribal pockets, teachers themselves do not have access, right? So I think it's for us to figure out what is the best way to sort of reach. But these are some genuine issues that are causing. Other key sort of data sets that we were able to realize, right? One, even though some of the teachers have been treated as frontline workers and they've been given vaccinations, a significant chunk of the parents felt that no one was able to reach out to their children. This came in from other reports also. There's an Azim Premji report. There's a SMF Shantilal Mehta Foundation, which is an organization based out of Pune in Maharashtra. They also did a research report on this. LFE we ourselves conducted it. If you see some of them, of course, I'm not going to go into the APU data. All of us know 92% of the children on average have lost specific language ability, especially when it comes to some of the foundational learning pieces. In spite of large TV ownership and radio ownership also, it was limited to the educational use. So many TV programs and radio programs also we were able to do. Many organizations have also done it. Many state governments have done it. But I think that there was always a limited use in spite of maximum penetration of television sets inside family households. So I think given all of this and the way the changing nature of education, the complexity of COVID waves and the pandemic and everything, the idea of education, the problem of education itself has evolved. So I think we need to be clear of what is that when we're talking about foundational literacy and numeracy, how much of our thought process aligns to the current problem. That's the first point I want to make, that the changing nature of educational sort of the crisis that is, we all saw the health crisis and what it did to our people during pandemic, but there is an education crisis that that is happening and we're not realizing it. So I think in all the crisis that is happening right now, what is the role of a foundational literacy numeracy mission and how do we think through that is going to be perhaps the first point I want to make, so that we are all rooted in what is real at this moment in time. And I'm sure many of you have already seen it, but I thought I'll just make that point in terms of the reality. The second piece of it is obviously the FLN mission. Perhaps this is a landmark sort of a mission. This is perhaps one of those points that was made in the national education policy, which was one long due. But the second, it is perhaps the first time when a government policy is taken, which is putting its foot down and saying that we're going to, by a set amount of date, by 2025, 26, we're going to improve the learning outcomes of children. So I think no other policy said it. They've all quoted that quality is improvement. Even RTA said that quality of learning outcomes is improvement. But this is the first time when there's a target-driven, mission-based approach that is taken. So Nipun Bharat, which is the guideline sort of a document, or the FLN mission, which is going to be called the Nipun Bharat, very beautiful document. For those who haven't read it, please do take time to read on that. But Nipun Bharat also talks about some of the, for those of you who've read it, you know this, but I think there's a very clear, sharp focus on improving learning outcomes. The mission clearly sort of specified the learning outcomes and skills and mindsets which the students will be building, right? And the way it needs to be monitored. There are wonderfully phrased guiding principles. It also says that if this is a mission, what are some of the guiding principles that the FLN mission needs to drive, both from a state level, but also in terms of who are the different sort of stakeholders that need to be in play. Because it's, even though it's a central government driven mission and the state government led sort of a mission, the implementation, etc., everything else, monitoring, implementation, everything else is going to happen much closer to the schools, which means your blocks, your districts are going to take prominence. So the roles are defined in that way, which I think is very strong. And then, of course, the relationship between the center and the states, and then the states and the districts, and how it needs to flow. So I think perhaps one document which gives a clear picture, because it's a very mission-driven sort of a approach that is being taken to improve the learning levels in literacy and numeracy. The mission is a very clear SOP guidelines in terms of what needs to be done, by when it needs to be done, how it needs to be done. Some of the key pillars, I'm sure the speakers who came before me in Detox Forum have mentioned about this on multiple occasions, but just to reiterate, at least in Maharashtra, the thing that we've been supporting SCRT, we've been asked by the SCRT to sort of support them in running this mission for the state of Maharashtra. Broadly, if you see, there are five areas, right? Like there's goal setting and communication. What is the kind of goal that you want to set, that you are publicly announcing, saying that this is the improvement, learning improvement that we commit ourselves both at a government level and for the teachers, right? Second, if you have set that goal, what is the kind of support you want to give both inside the classrooms through teaching learning material and to the capacity building of teachers, which is your TLM and the teacher profession development. Of course, Nishta is going to be like a FLN program that's going to come in from the center, but can the states themselves also provide more contextual sort of support to the teachers through the courses? All of this, and then it is set governance and accountability, but what is the kind of monitoring and evaluation processes that are going to be in place to ensure that the mission is driven in an actual mission way? So I think the governance structures and the way accountability is there through the mission, that is going to be important. And the last piece of it is, of course, assessments. All of this run when we are going to introduce a certain level of reading program or a learning program, how are we ensuring that the assessments are also aligned to what we want to measure, and they are able to capture the essence of the true learning levels or the foundational learning levels of children? And all of this supported by a robust project monitoring and review system, both inside the government, at a district level, at a block level, even at the lowest level, at a cluster level. Even the CRCs, or what we call Kendra Pramukhs in Maharashtra, are able to monitor and sort of support the teachers in that direction. And of course, this is not going to be one organization or one government. It has to be a collective effort. It needs to be driving a lot of NGOs, a lot of CSRs, a lot of other technology partners, PMUs, everyone supporting the government. This is going to be a government mission. So how can all of us come together to be able to support the government in doing this is going to be the key aspect to work. And broadly, in terms of our approach, also like this, obviously, like the home learning seems to be important because even God's grace, everything goes well. We are able to open up our schools by October and November. Till that time, we still have another couple of months till the time schools go back to how they were a couple of years back. So I think broadly there has to be an effective integration of all the programs that is running, and this seems to be a challenge right now, not just for Maharashtra, but I think many other states. How do you sort of build a comprehensive program that involves parents and teachers aligned to like foundational literacy and numeracy content, driving the learning levels of the children. In fact, I also want to say Maharashtra government recently launched Bridge Course, which perhaps is a very strong example of how government ownership to drive a 45-60 day program to say that, you know what, all children are going to learn certain levels of basic level learning before we even go to the next stage of grade level sort of learning. And then given that 15-16 months of school closure has led to a lot of learning loss, just focusing on foundational, some of these minimum learning levels was a big part of how the Bridge Course was launched in Maharashtra. So I think it's a very great example. But I also want to do some comparison, and this is where I'm going to end my sort of uh, my sharing, and I'll let with some Q&A. But I think just want to also compare the kind of a mission at a meta level. If you see at a very bird's eye view level, there's an element of comparison of how it needs to be a mission mode. And one of the recent missions that we have seen is the Swachh Bharat mission. Of course, there's been a lot of positives. There's been a lot of development areas also in the way the mission was run. But I think what were some of the things that we can really learn from that mission that can be applied in the way that FLN mission also needs to be driven is one, it was a nationwide movement. It was always made to believe that it was a people's movement. It needs to be led by the people. It's a very similar thing. Like every teacher, every parent, every individual who's at a village level or at a town level has a role to play in improving the foundational learning levels. The way we made cleanliness to be like one of the biggest aspect of how our lives are going to be changed, that's the way we need to make sure that ensuring every child has certain level of foundational literacy and numeracy skills needs to be the thing that is going to be driving our communities. The second piece of it is, even though it was initiated by the center, there was a lot of contextualization that happened at the district, which I think was fabulous. Like there are certain indicators that came in from the center. There's some contextualization that happened at the state, but it was a district-led sort of a movement. There's a lot of effort taken by the DMs and the collectors to be making sure that they're following certain initiatives at the ground level. The third, there were many individuals influencers. When in a country like India, we need those influencers, both educators and also social media influencers, to be backing such a mission, saying that this is a mission that is important for us. Like everyone needs to sort of support it. The way, I mean, all of us know what happened in Swachh Bharat and the way many people backing it up. So we need influencers here also to be able to. There is a optics around how missions operate, and to able to gather community mobilization. These optics are important. So how are we ensuring that some of these pieces are in place and people are genuinely caring about improving learning levels of the children? And the last, of course, is media exposure and support. As a country, we've always struggled to put education at the forefront. Education has never been like the agenda. In fact, it's a phenomenon that after 1986, this is the year, 2020 was a year when a national education policy has been adopted and has been formed. So I think the kind of media support that we need to get to put education and foundational learning at the forefront needs to be unparalleled. So I feel like these are some things that happened in Swachh Bharat mission that I felt we could actually take it for rolling out FLN. But I'm going to end my sort of sharing with three key aspects, which I feel is going to be critical in the success of this mission, given that, for those of you who are watching who spend a lot of time on the ground working with the teachers, we all know the challenges that happen there. But I think working in some of those challenging sort of circumstances, working with the diverse set of stakeholders, including the government, I personally feel like there are three aspects that we need to consider. One, any educational change is a convergence of three aspects. It has to marry accountability, motivation, and support. There is no way that we can tighten our accountability and say every teacher is going to achieve X, Y, Z, and then ensure FLN goals are going to be met. They're not going to be met. We need to make sure that we are tightening accountability. At the same time, there is enough support for our teachers, not just in terms of training, but also the mentoring, the coaching through classroom observations that is sort of given. Even with these two, there's an element of motivation, which is, of course, very, very personal. It's very sort of specific to teachers also. But I think we need to be, this is where the influencers, this is where the administrative and political leadership of the states and districts is going to play a big role. So how do we sort of marry these three to ensure that our teachers become the front face of the movement of FLN mission? Second piece of it is around data, and I think this many discussions, many sort of theories have been done on how do we, especially whatever you're running, you run a vaccination camp, you run I don't know, the whole Swachh Bharat, whatever I think we're doing, data is going to be critical, right? Similar for FLN, how are we tracking the different indicators of FLN mission is going to be critical. So the two or three things. One is just the authenticity. Mechanisms to capture and analyze need to be strong. We need to have very strong and simple. The key thing is not to complicate too many, but key thing is to have simple mechanisms to capture and analyze data. But how are we ensuring that there is level of authenticity and usage? But the key thing is to do everything in a low stake way. We just cannot make learning of children a high stake issue. The minute we take a high stake issue, people are going to, I mean, you want 100% result, people are going to show you 100% result. Whether it happened or not is a different issue. But how do you keep data at the sort of forefront with confidentiality, with trust is going to be the key, and not just focus on the mechanism. And the last piece of it, and I always sound like a broken record when I said this, but focusing on co-creation. These are all, we're talking about a mission that we want to be led by the government for the largest set of people, for the children of the country. So this has to be a mission that has to be co-created, right from the point of what is a kind of training module, what is a kind of teaching learning material, what is a kind of content, what is a kind of budgets that you're sort of allocating for this mission. All of this needs to be co-created. It cannot be driven by one single organization or one single NGO, or so it has to be, and the governments are open to it. I think they're very, very open. They need a lot of people to support them. They're open to suggestions. So I think we need to be able to sort of figure out, rather than pushing our own point of view, whatever pieces that we need are the elements of co-creation. I think we should be able to sort of support the governments in that direction. So it takes a lot of patience. It is not easy to do, but I think we should do that for the true sustenance of this mission. I think we should be able to do that. And of course, needless to say, is collaboration. We all need to come together to be able to sort of do it. So I feel, given the ground realities and making sure a policy like this, a mission like this, which is once in a lifetime sort of a mission for a country like India, and comes in at the right time with 15-16 months of school closure, for us to make it a reality, for collectively all of us to make it a reality, I feel, according to our experience, these are the three things that I just wanted to share. So with that, I'm just going to stop here and hand it over to Mashood for any Q&A or anything that you want to take forward.
Right. Madhukar, thank you so much for setting like a really solid context of the policy, and also the realities, the ground realities in which this policy finds itself being implemented in. I think that's a very important perspective that you've shared here in the forum. And also a very solid template for all stakeholders, including government, civil society organizations, a template to actually think on a lot of different aspects and a lot of important questions that we here who are working with the public education system need to think about when it comes to actually helping the government succeed in this mission. I actually wanted to start with one of the very concluding points which you made, and also something which you mentioned in the beginning as well, about co-creation. And what Leadership for Equity, one of its guiding principles since the beginning has been co-creation. What I wanted to understand was, over time, the operations and the growth of the scale at which you're working has expanded quite exponentially. Do you think when we work at scale, does that offer a challenge to uh, co-creating all these different aspects and of intervention with respect to education?
Yeah, I think a lot of the co-creation aspect and whether you want to do it or not depends a lot on what is the change you want to bring in. Like, is it more towards saying that we're going to scale the idea or we're going to scale and do it ourselves? If you want to do it yourself, then I think there's no element of co-creation. Then you put in your own 1,000 teachers and they go and teach children. But that's not what we want. At least from what I understand is non-profit organizations also the ability to scale beyond a point is it is limited. Like, you can't scale beyond a point. It's not humanly possible because the largest NGO or non-profit organization in India's budget is about roughly 250 crores, the largest education NGO. The smallest state in India is Sikkim with a 450 crore budget. So there's no way we can actually match it. So the idea of co-creation is to see, one, what is the give and take that we need to be doing to be able to sort of say that there is enough ownership that is built in by the maximum stakeholders. In this case, it is the sort of the government. So if you're working with the government, then I think because they have the authority, the academic control over a larger subset of children and teachers, what are some things that we can sort of work with them to be able to influence that larger subset? And for that, give and take needs to happen, even though whatever experiments we are doing in depth are very, very critical. But there's a wisdom that already exists within your SCRTs, your diets, your district officers. So how do you sort of work with them to be able to create? So then, one, for the ownership, and second, obviously, for sustenance. If they know that this is a program that I have sort of taken ownership and I've started it, then the sustenance and the chance of sustaining that is going to be higher. And that's how you unlock the funding also from the government, right? Like, if an education officer pitching something, or if a director or a state secretary doing that, this is a program that I want to create, has a higher chance of unlocking some of these larger funds for quality improvement than you and me sort of going in and convincing them to unlock those funds. So that's the piece, Mashud. That's the reason I think we spend a lot of time. It takes time. It's not obviously easy. You need to have a lot of patience. You need to do a give and take. But I think it's critical for sustenance. And if you see some of the work that we have done, a lot of the work is on that. We always say it doesn't matter if ka naam nahi aayega to bhi chalega. But I think it's your thing. You front end whatever program you want to do. We're going to be in the backdrop and support the way it's done. So,
Right. And LFE's work has, of course, from the beginning also focused at a more decentralized level, at the more local level in terms of middle level managers at the cluster level, at the block level. In terms of co-creating the success of any mission, especially with respect to foundational literacy and numeracy in this context, it seems that co-creation is an exercise at multiple levels, right from national, state, and at the more local levels. So if we talk more at the going below this state level in terms of district and sub-district levels, what would some successes and learnings be with respect to co-creating with stakeholders at these levels? If you'd like to share some.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are certain elements of any academic programs that happen a lot at the state or the national level, right? For example, I think the state level a lot to do with the teacher training or the curriculum, what needs to be done. I think that happens at a state level, and that needs to happen at a state level because there's some level of standardization that needs to come in on what's right and what's wrong. And I think the expertise that exists at the state level needs to decide on that. What co-creation can look like at a district level, and I think that's where we are teams where we work with about 4 districts and 2-3 municipal corporations across Maharashtra. A lot of the effort is to see how can some of these state or national schemes can be effectively implemented, because a lot of support that happens at the district and block level or even the cluster level is to make sure that the last mile delivery happens effectively. Because what is our big problem with policies, and you also mentioned it, right? Paper pe sab kuch is perfect, but I think when it actually comes down, how do you ensure that it's effectively implemented? And that involves 2 or 3 things. Even though there's a guideline that's coming that, you know what, this is a program you need to do, this is how you need to do it. A typical sort of some of these trainings, maybe 10 years back, I've seen some of these trainings where 500-600 teachers were stuffed into one room. There was one person with a mic in front of them delivering a lecture. That what used to be called training ho gaya to ho gaya. It's a tick mark. Now, what has shifted? Many states have realized that just stuffing teachers in one room, 500, it's not making any sense, right? So when that order comes in that in your district you need to train 100% of your teachers, then you sit down with the diets and say, hey, look, boss, like you need to train, but you know if you train 500, 600 at a time, it's not going to be effective. They might be resource constrained, but even if it means that it takes time, can we do it in batches of 50? Can we do it in batches of 60, smaller? Can we create professional learning communities? So the how of execution of any policy, that can be co-created diets, and the districts and the diets have that level of autonomy, academic autonomy or implementation autonomy to be able to do that. That's one level. And then the other level is, again, monitoring. How do you ensure that there's enough data that is coming in at a district level for you to be able to monitor any scheme of programs effectively that is created at state level? Now, general thumb of rule, they might follow ki, acha, theek hai, ye aa gaya, just to show a tick mark activity, they might show. But if you're sitting with the district administration, with the Zilla Parishad body, with the diets to be able to say, this is what has come from the state, can we just sit down and plan a bit? How will the planning look like? Suppose if you have to create master trainers at the district level. Can we do a master trainer sort of a workshop? Can we do dry runs? And I cannot tell you, we're so happy with the way Maharashtra, some of the officers we work with, पहले ड्राई रन्स नहीं होते थे. आप अगर टीचर ट्रेनिंग कंडक्ट कर रहे हो तो सडनली ऐसे लगता है कि नींद उठा के आपने कर लिया. बट the concept of dry runs, if I am executing in front of 500, I need to practice myself to be able to execute in front of many more people. And that way I get better at my own facilitation skills. This was a very, very interesting, for us, it's not new, especially if you are a training organization. But I think for the government, it was great. And I'm so happy to share so many district level bodies that we work with do dry runs now on their own, even without LFE support. So these are the smaller things. How do you make a scheme effective, ensuring that the delivery of any training program becomes effective? That co-creation support, coaching support can be offered at a district and block level to make it stronger.
That's very heartening to know some of the experiences that you've shared with respect to Maharashtra. You another very interesting point which you made was this trinity of accountability, motivation, and support. What is your assessment of how middle-level managers that have looked at or have approached that accountability, motivation, and support before the current context of pandemic and this new mission? And do you think, in your assessment, that middle-level managers, when it comes to the implementation of this mission, what would their role be in terms of ensuring that these three the trinity actually stands strong and is able to make policy move into real practice?
Yeah, so I think there are two pieces, right? Like I think I made a statement saying that in any education chain, you need to be able to marry these three pieces. You need to be able to aggregate these three pieces for any sort of change. The thing about accountability, motivation, and support is, unfortunately, the education system, the way we have structured is, in a way, it is for each of these pieces, there are different bodies that are accountable. That are responsible, let's not say accountable. So accountability might lie with your block education officer or the district administration. Your support is done by diets or SCRT. Your motivation, generally in government systems, it's very hard to find like true motivation, but they themselves find whoever are the teachers who are doing great thing, right? So when your bodies that are actually responsible to be able to do that change process with teachers, there are only three different bodies, and it's hard to sort of bring them together. That's one. The second piece of it is, more often in government systems or in teachers, what we find is, आप teachers को सीधा करने के लिए आप ये पत्र निकालो, show cause दे दो. Some of these which are strong, hardcore, you crack a whip and everyone is going to perform. Or then the more evolved is, you bring in a solid sort of a data management system, तो सब ठीक हो जाएगा. Those are all accountability measures. You can put in all of these things in place, but that if you're not supporting the teachers, if you're not sort of motivating them, change is not going to happen. So I think like every time like we have seen any sort of program, it is either skewed on one of these three things. Either आपने बहुत support कर दी, इतना support कर दिया कि there's no accountability and motivation, or you motivate so much that there's no accountability and then there's no support. So whatever the teachers want, they do. So then it's hard to measure the impact क्या हुआ क्या है. So the key aspect to sort of discuss in this is there has to be the right optimum sort of way to be able to do the three things, but the three things have to happen. Without those three things, it's going to be hard, right? So yeah, I mean, those are the issue with that is the bodies of people who are responsible to be able to do those three things are separate. So even where does the convergence come in? In my view, I think it needs to be at a cluster level. The closest to the teachers who are your teacher mentors, CRCs, those are the people who are critical to not just keep the entire system. It's like saying like in any team, right? If you see some of the big corporate teams or anything, there's obviously like the lowest level team leader who actually, or the project leader who actually keeps your teams do all of these three. They support, they motivate, and they are accountable. But I think one statement I want to make is that in an education system, we always sort of go back to saying ki the teacher and the child relationship is the most critical. That's the entire thing that what we're trying to do with the whole foundational literacy numeration mission is precisely that. I feel that the teacher-student relationship is a direct reflection of how the middle management and the teacher relationship is. So why would we expect the teacher is going to treat the child well if the teacher is not treated well by the bosses there? And the same thing, middle management to your superior IS officers or the political administrative leadership. So it all flows down. Jab mujhe pata hai my boss is going to treat me this way, that's the same way I'm going to treat my teacher. And the teachers are going to treat the same way with the child. So it's a very, these are very subtle aspects, but that's how a system has been built over years and years. So we need to break this wheel, break this sort of cycle. So that's where I think this concept of three things getting married together might work.
Thanks for sharing that perspective, Madhukar. One more very important statement I think you made was also to do with assessments, where you said that assessments should not be made like a very high stake, like do or die kind of a prospect for teachers. And I think that also comes from, assessment data being used as, like for punitive action against the ones who are not like performing very high on that. When we have a national mission, which talks about, very specific goals, and when it talks about urgency, and it also talks about the National Achievement Survey to be done this year and then in 2017 later, it sounds high stakes that way. Do you agree with that?
It does, and this is one of the fears of the FLN mission also. I think already we have moved India to a place where our 10th class, 10th board exams, 12 board exams are like a do or die situation. They're high pressure cooker situations for our children, and we have seen like a lot of mental imbalance, suicide issues. A lot of these issues are already. We have to be mindful. As a society, we've always been competitive, so assessments have always played a big part in the way our education system is designed. But when we're talking about foundational learning, we're talking about those basic things. It's like learning a beautiful language, like learning singing. It's like learning some of these elements that needs to be an integral part of your being. And when we're looking at doing that for 100% of our children across country, it needs to be hosted. We need to monitor. No one is saying don't monitor, but I think if you get in second grade children, unko bitha diya tables pe, and then you give an OMR sheet for them to sort of do it, and do that just like it creates a pressure movement, and children might not feel that, but I think the adults in the system is going to feel it. So how it's going to reflect, right? Like I give a target to a school saying you need to be 100% this thing. So the teachers are not good. They're always good at passing. So wo pressure niche jayega. It's not going to stay with the teachers, right? Your cluster has to be 100% FLN ready. It's the same thing I was mentioning the other day. Right? Swachh Bharat mein open defecation free dikhana hai, to you can always show. There's nothing to not show, right? So how do you break that? Say that these are all measures for us to really learn more about our children rather than punitive measures. Like the conversations generally are like, if 100% is not achieved, then what is a problem? I'm not giving you a show cause notice, but I'm asking you with an intention to support you. If a teacher stands up and says, you know what, I have 30 children, only 20 were able to do even after 1 year, then the officer who's supporting the teacher needs to come up and say, great data point, now how can I support you for the remaining 10? Not to say कि मैं आपको show cause notice निकाल रहा हूँ just because you haven't been able to earn yet. That's the shift that we need to bring. Till the time those shifts don't happen by looking at data, data is always a threat to teachers. Data will always remain a threat to the officers. तो इसीलिए जो दिखाना है वो दिखा सकते हैं. Like you can always show 100% of children are learning. So, but we know it's not true. So that's the thing about assessment. So it's a very, very tricky plane to work with. But we need. I'm not against monitoring. We need to have certain structures and processes in place.
On assessments, another question that I had was: do we have any examples or any success stories where I mean, like you correctly mentioned, that data should not be like punitive, right? It should be something which is kind of more useful. Do we have any examples or success stories where data has been collected with the intention to actually improve learning, and it has had been used to kind of at different levels, being used constructively rather than punitively?
Absolutely, and I think that's where some of the statements we're making are coming from that only. I'll give you an example. In 2017 to 2019, 2 years, in 18 months, we ran this remedial program across the Pune Municipal Corporation. Pune is about 200 school network, and across the Pune Municipal Corporation for about 50,000 children, we ran a remedial program, which was a level-based sort of program for improving foundational. So similarly, I think it was an FLN-driven structured pedagogy sort of a model. And so the first time we gave data so we got the data, and what we realized was the actual data that was there was very, very different. I mean, majority level. Ideally, when you knew that there are at least 40% of the children in the lowest level, they showed 70% bias. So we know there was no data that was true. What we did with that data, we didn't publish it, we didn't give it to anyone, not even somebody knew that anyone else was an issue. We called all the teachers back again, and we said, look, here's the data. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to trust you. We are not, whatever data you've given is great. And are you not able to hear me, Mashu?
No, I can hear you now. Yeah.
Is it better now?
Yes, now it's much more better. Yeah. Please continue.
Yeah, so we told the teachers, look, we trust your data. I think we'll go with whatever you say, because we can't operate or do this program starting with a mistrust. So we're going to trust this data. So we went ahead and we said, this is the data, this is the program, and so we're going to start executing the program. After a couple of weeks of execution of the program, the teachers themselves came back and said, look, I know this is the data, but I know that these are the children that are not in this level. They actually should be in the bottom level. So the entire numbers that we got in level 1 and 2 completely became reverse. So it was just like completely changed, and they themselves came and said it, because they knew that this was not a one-time thing. We were going to constantly measure, and whatever data you had, you yourself have to implement, and not anyone else, as a government or as a non-profit organization or a group of people. So that level of open, honest communication with teachers really, really helps, and we were able to do it for a 200 school system. We're talking about the entire municipal corporation of Pune. So, but then I think we need to be able to do this for multiple school systems across state and the country. So this is a great example. I often give this example, but it's fabulous the way teachers accepted, saying, we feared that this data is going to be used for something else, but now we understand that this data is for us, and we're going to use it to change our instruction. That just changed the way they looked at data and the way we were collecting it.
Right. Thanks, Madhukar, for sharing that example. And it's a very important point that, again, reiterating that data is something which needs to be useful, and also, it's very important that who makes sense of that data, like who uses that data, who is it available for. because if that data is, let's say, published and then it goes into international journals, etc., but it's not being used for the children, and for the actual purpose for which data
Yeah.
is supposed to be collected. That's a very crucial point, and it's important to integrate that in all the education systems as well. Um, Here, another question that which is also coming from this context which you have very strongly set, which is a lot of children missing, or missing in the sense that not being in connection, not being in contact with their children. And I think there was an ASAR V1 data as well, which kind of showed that nearly 2 out of 3 children in rural areas were not in touch with their teacher in the reference week. Um, this, of course, sets a very disturbing kind of a reality. And in the foreseeable future, we are seeing that this kind of a situation where some children are connected through synchronous learning, some through asynchronous, some in community. Uh, the, what would co-creation mean in this context, especially when we are talking about community members? Are there any opportunities, any success stories so far which you would like to share, which talks about co-creating the learning of children with families and community members?
Yeah, there are. I think initial sort of work that we've been doing with the Pune Zilla Parishad. I think with the Pune Diet, we've been working for the last 6-7 months, and Pune Diet officers have come up with a wonderful program called the Parent Engagement Program. It's a sort of a district-wide program where they're sending sort of materials for the parents to, one, from health point of view, also what is that nutrition and the minimum kind of food intake that you need to be doing with your children, so that they don't sort of, even if they contract COVID, what are the kind of precautionary measures. So there's an element of that, but there's also some sort of a program like a Swadhyay, which is a WhatsApp-based sort of a delivery mechanism, where the parents' mobile phones, you get messages on WhatsApp. It's like a chatbot thing, and we're doing this in partnership with, of course, SCRT Maharashtra and Convigenius, who's a technology partner, where that kind of learning happens at a home, where the parent actually shows a mobile phone and then goes to the WhatsApp and then does it with the child, especially for first and second grade, because I think they're very young children, right? So I think those pieces are there. But what does co-creation look like at a district level is to really figure out what are some of these programs that we need to be doing for parent engagement. I mean, I know you started off the conversation by saying out of school children, but even working with the local administration to say, look, boss, there's a chance that you might lose 10,000 children from your schools into child labor. So can we create a return to school sort of a campaign at a district level, run by the district collector, by the police administration, everyone, wherever you find a child who's not inside school, can we sort of track him? And Maharashtra also has a wonderful sort of a program called Bal Rakshak. Like, anyone who's out of school need to be brought back to school by the teachers who are volunteer. But it can be anything: teacher, community worker, ASHA worker, Anganwadi worker. Anyone can actually bring back the child and connect him or her into school. They're called Bal Rakshak. It was called Bal Rakshak movement, which was started a few years back. Now, I feel that's a great, program. But I think, how do you then, organizations who are sort of working with local administrations need to support this? Like, there is an idea like this, can we create a program around it? Then the government has certain ideas, and organizations like us sit with the collector or whoever other district administration folks and say, how do you sort of do? Can we start a helpline wherever you are finding children who are not in school? Can there be a helpline for helping the parents figure out the economic issues? Because a majority problem why children are going back is because of economic issues. Just help me in getting more money and bread on the table. So I feel some of these pieces need to be resolved. So we need to have some mechanisms that are at a district level that are helping the children and the parents to send the children back to school. So all of these things can be co-created. Some districts are not even thinking about it because some are fighting COVID so much that we have kept education at the back burner, which is fair. I mean, saving lives was most important, at least when the waves were hitting. But now, slowly, when we're moving towards reopening and ensuring children are getting back into schools, we need to find mechanism and programs that are able to do that. And all of that can be co-created.
Right. Madhukar, one last question that we had was to also look at the challenge or the opportunity of multilingualism and what that offers for children, right? And like Maharashtra, of course, linguistically diverse and very rich that way. And of course, India is of course has that unique aspect of children, having a different mother tongue, having a different language at home, and a different medium of instruction in school. Do you think that remote learning and these different methods of, the new reality of remote teaching and learning, does that what does that mean for the challenges of multilingualism, and how are teachers adapting to this? What should be our approach when it comes to multilingual education moving forward?
Yeah, so I think multilingual education comes in a lot. Predominantly, I've seen it in the urban context, especially in larger cities where their children are coming from multiple sort of regional backgrounds or mother tongues. When they're coming in, and then the schools there are either your English medium or your Marathi. Like if you talk about Bombay, all Marathi medium schools, or they also run English medium, which is an exception. But there are very few Gujarati medium or Hindi medium. But what about people coming in from other languages? So there's no way, like a municipal body also, as rich as you might be as Bombay, you can not create a 26 languages sort of thing, So I think those things are always hard. I think multilingual sort of education for children, which is predominantly urban, but also you find it in deep rural tribal pockets, because tribal, there's always a dialect and then there's a tribal language. But I think the teachers who the government appoints are predominantly the local language. Like even if you see in Maharashtra, some of the tribal areas of Gadchiroli, Nandurbar, even in Nashik, some of the areas like Surgana, Pend, which share border with Gujarat, there's a lot of tribal population. And they speak a different dialect and the teachers speak Marathi. Now, it depends a lot on how much effort the teachers are taking to learn the local dialect, and they sort of do it. But at a state level, I think we need to ensure that there's a lot of curriculum and support both in digital form and printed form that is reaching these children. If there's a particular thing like a tree ko hum agar ped bolte hai, to unke language mein there's something else. But I think to be able to cater to certain level of curriculum or material that actually captures all of these three languages is going to be important. So not many states are prepared, quite honestly, because I think this multilingual problem is always for less than like 2-3%. And to do something for 2-3% of the children, you need to spend a good 10% of your funds, which many states are reluctant, or it's not, quite honestly, it's not available. There's no provision to do spend more amount of money and to do that. So I feel in this current situation, I think it definitely hampers a lot, because I think it might, if every child had access to digital device, then it would have been different, because a child sitting in Mumbai with a Kannada understanding can actually log into a Kannada teacher who might be sitting in Bangalore. So that is not a problem. But not every child has it, right? Less than 25% of the children, even in urban areas, have access to digital devices. It's in fact even less when you look at some of the poorest neighborhoods. So I think, for me, I think the solution, multilingual ho, general education ho, I think it has to be offline. It has to be thoda bahut, you can keep it blended. But I can give you examples in Nashik. Some of the things that we're trying out to say is the teachers, especially in those villages where there's less than 2% COVID positivity rate, and the teachers are also coming to schools, because it's now a state government has asked all the teachers to go back into school. So even if the teachers open up the schools for a few hours, 3 days a week, the remaining 3 days the children can learn with communities, with the elder brothers and sisters. That in itself is a great start for multilingual, multi-level, or any other sort of instructional piece, but the continuity of engaging with certain academic content needs to be there. So, and that more and more convinced with international research, nationally, regionally, everything, it cannot be done online. It cannot be done with devices. It cannot be done. It's not working. Even with the best of 100% devices, there is enough proof that online education doesn't work. So I don't, and it might work for some of the elite rich where there's a lot of support at home and everyone else, but that's not India. We are here to serve the underserved. So I think for them it's not working. It's clearly we require a different strategy, and that requires all of us to push to support our children face to face. That's why we need to reopen our schools very, very, very quickly.
Right. That's a very important point, and I think we would like to take that point towards the end, for all our viewers to also mull a bit more upon that, it's important to make a start. It's important that whether it's a few hours a week in the school, or if it's in the community, that continuous engagement with academic content, and also that engagement with children, whether it is within the community or with the teachers, is crucial. That might actually be the most important thing to ensure that we don't lose out millions of children completely out of our education system. Madhukar, it has been an absolute pleasure having you here at Detox. Thank you for really helping trigger a lot of thoughts and important questions in terms of how co-creation can happen, and really helping us also set some new perspectives on how accountability, motivation, and support needs to be conceptualized and looked at different levels. So once again, thank you so much for your time. It was an absolute honor having you here at Detox.
Thank you so much, Mashood, and Detox team for having me. Thank you.
Thank you.